Yeah, it's just started. Yeah, thanks, Vivek. So we'll start the session. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Global Biz Apps Day 2020, powered by D65 Champs. I'm Ankush Grover. I, along with Nishita Hegde, will be moderating the session. This session is presented by Ivan Ficko. Ivan is an MVP and will be talking about 10 PCF tips and tricks. Ivan has got more than 5 years of consulting experience. His technical expertise includes various versions of Dynamics CRM, .NET, HTML, Dynamics NAV, SQL Server integration services, etc. So before I hand over the session to him, I would like to mention that if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat window and we will take that either during the session if possible or during the Q&A time. Thank you again for joining and enjoy the session. Ivan, over to you.
Okay, let me share the screen. Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see.
Perfect. Okay, then minimize that and we can start. Perfect.
Great.
So, hello once again, everyone. I'm Ivan and I will be talking about PCF's tips and tricks. How can you improve your PCF development? How can you speed up? How can you improve your documentation and stuff around PCF with 10 tips that I will mention here. Okay, let's start with a quick introduction. So, who am I? I'm a software developer that has a background in web development, but I fairly early started in business applications. So from then on, 5 years from now, I was in BizApp space. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for business applications. I'm located in Zagreb, Croatia, and working for the biggest Microsoft partner in Croatia called Span. You can find me on LinkedIn, my blog, or Twitter that you can see on the screen right now. And feel free to ask any questions related to business applications development. Okay, let's start with a countdown. So first, we need some tools to make our PCFs. Microsoft recommends or requires so Node.js, npm as the main core development environment. And my personal preference for editing everything is Visual Studio Code because it has all the tools I need straight inside it, so I don't need to change the screens, change the windows. It's all there to start development. But of course, they're only the must-have tools. They're always community tools that will help you to empower your development. And let's start with the first one. So the oldest one that was built first is PCF Builder. It's an XRM toolbox tool that allows you to visually click on all the commands for the PCF development straight from the UI. It's easy for the beginners. If you're a total beginner with a PCF, I strongly encourage you to use this PCF Builder tool because it will make your life much easier and you will get familiar really fast with all the commands that you need to run for your PCF development. The second one is like the version 2 of the PCF builder. So the niche that build a tool translated all the features directly to Visual Studio. So now you don't need to leave Visual Studio Code to execute the commands. You just press Control Shift P and pick your command. You can build components, initialize repositories, everything just by choosing the command from the list when you open the Visual Studio add-on. It's easy because you don't need to know the syntax for any commands that you need in development. You just pick the command and tool will do everything for you. Ask you for questions if he needs more info, and after that just executes the commands. It's really great tool. And the third one is my tool called PCF Generator, and it's used basically for scaffolding your initial repository for the PCF control. You need to execute dozens of commands to initialize your repository or project properly. Generator will do that for you. He will ask you for a few questions and execute all the commands in background, which will result with samples, full folder structure like solution. You can just pick the solution and import it straight to the environment after you execute the yo PCF command, because it will produce a fully functional component straight away, and you're ready to go. You just need to focus on the development, not the executing that initialization of your project. Okay, we covered the tools. Now we go to what do we need to do to make our controls intuitive. Basically, all the end users want to know how to use it, because if I don't know how to use my control, I will probably not use it. So spend some time on your manifest file. I know that people are lazy. They don't want to do the, let's say, documentation, because you're basically documenting stuff through your manifests. You're inputting like descriptions and like friendly names there that you maybe don't want to, because you want to focus on your development, but spend some time there, edit especially control and properties descriptions. Those are the most important, because people will know that way what to use on your component for which use case. If you have a complex controls, for example, you have JSON configurations that you want to input in some of your fields, do a proper documentation for that, because I've seen some controls that are configuration heavy on those like JSON configurations, and you don't have proper documentation for that. And when you try it for the first time, you try to reverse engineer it just to know how it works, you will probably end up throwing it away and try another component. It's important to describe what's really important. People tend to use too many words to describe something. Don't do it. Just input less characters, but more info. That's the most important part. So basically, when you create a control, it will just have some generic descriptions, friendly names, like you see here. So it says property display key and properties description key. That's not what you want. You want to have fancy text control, as you see here, with spaces, a description control that makes your text red, so user knows what this component is used for straight away. So you make it more intuitive as you can. The third one is preview image. Like, I think 90% or more, even more, controls don't have preview image. You can see on the left there is no preview image, and on the right you can see there is some demo preview image that you can set on your control. You should definitely use that preview images. Why? Because people are visual types. They will always make the decisions based on the visuals. So if I see the image, or maybe a GIF that shows me how to use control, or how that controls it looks like in the environment, I will most likely give it a try at least. In terms of dimensions, you must keep in mind that the dimensions of that preview image is always fixed. So it's width 170 pixels and height 130 pixels. As you can see on the right, if you don't make the ratio right, so the ratio is the thing that you need to care, it will just stretch it. No matter if it's width or height, it will just be stretched, and maybe it will not show as you would like to see it. It's easy to add it. There is a control node, and you just need to add attribute preview image, put the path to your preview image where you set it in your project, and you're good to go. By default, when you're executing pack commands, it will not create that attribute for you, But if you, for example, use a PCF generator, it will already be there, and you just need to change the path to your image. And also keep in mind that you don't need a resource node for the preview image. I've seen that people are like double checking the image in the resources and also in the control node. You don't need a resource node. You don't need to add them there. It will be displayed perfectly if you just add it as attribute. Okay, that's all for the preview image. And now we go to the localization part. Localization is, let's say, better in the global scale because like 60% of controls use localization, and it's really easy, and I don't see why you wouldn't use localization for your controls. And when you need to localize your control, what do you need to do? You need to have a regex file. A regex file will hold all the data you need for your translations. But the important part here is you need to identify which language do I want to add my regex file for. So I need to know language code ID. So it's called LCID, and I don't know where to find it. You can find it all around the internet, but it's not handy to know all the codes by yourself. You always need to look up for it. For example, you can see few codes here, but you don't want to know that codes for every single language. Okay, so and think about your end users at the first time, because maybe some people don't know English. They want to use the system on their own language, and all they need to do to make that possible is make another regex files, add that regex files to the component, and it will be translated for them. Maybe it looks scary at first, but trust me, anyone can do a regex file, because regex is basically an XML file that has only data nodes that you need to edit. So you only need to add those nodes to add the translation. Basically, ignore everything else if you are just translating the file, and add the translations in your data nodes, and you're good to go. There are two levels of localization. One is configuration level, which will be shown only on the base language of the system. So if I have provisioned a database in English, I will only do configuration in English, and it will be always be shown in English. But for example, if I make my database in Croatian, I will do configuration in Croatian language. So I need to have localization for Croatian in that case. The other level is control UI. So everything that wants to be translated in the UI, so when the control is rendered, you need to do it by the regex files too. Okay, just add those keys and you're good to go. You just need to use one simple command to get the actual value from the regex files, but that's easy as that. So as I said, language codes, you don't need to know them, use tools around, it will help you. Think ahead, because when somebody wants to add a language, you will have the infrastructure for it. They just need to translate the regex file and they're good to go and try the control in their own language. Okay, let's just go real quick to the Visual Studio so I can show you some things that I talked before. So the first thing I talked is the preview image. Okay, let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, perfect. You see the control node, and if I scroll to the right, there is a preview image. Okay, this attribute, you just need to add this attribute and path to your image. And if we see here, I have a folder called img and preview image png here, and it will automatically add that image for you. You don't need to add anything else in your control manifest. we can just go to the part where regex files are. So we have 3 regex files here. First is for creation. This one is for English, and I don't know which one is that. But there is strings folder here where I generated 3 regex files. If I open the English one, for example, and scroll all the way down, I can see that there are data nodes. So data node is basically a key and a value that you want to translate. So I have control display name key here, and it will say fancy text control if we have language set to English. Okay, and how can we make that happen in our manifest? So we need to pick that exact key in our translation. In our manifest file, you have control and display name key. And here you can define a string that doesn't need to be a key, but then it will not be translated. It will show just like a simple string. But if you add a key here, and if that key exists in the regex files, it will be translated. And that's everything you need to know. So in every description or name, so free string text that you can input, you can put a key, put that key in a regex file and get it translated. And it's simple as that. And the interesting thing here is if you're using PCF generator, a PCF builder for Visual Studio Code, you can just go Control-Shift-P, and I want to add a new regex file. Just pick add new regex file here, and okay, let's go for Albanian because it's quite here. Okay, press enter, and it will add the regex file for you. You don't need to do anything. It will be added to the manifest, and I think this is the one that was added. Yeah, this because it has just the template data here, and you can, with a few clicks, you can add a new language, just populate the translations, and you're good to go. And now you see, why wouldn't you use that translations? And if you want to use it on the UI level, all you need to do is use the getString method from the context and resources. So here I said context resources getString text input placeholder, and this is a key inside my regex file. So if I text input placeholder, if I go to my regex for English and search text input placeholder, it will show the value here. And if I use it in English, it will render in UI with this placeholder. Perfect. We covered the translations now. Okay, let's back to the presentation and go on with the countdown. Fifth thing is the libraries that you want to use while you are developing your PCF controls. Most of the controls of first-party controls from Microsoft are using React and Office Fabric UI. Or maybe we should not call it anymore Office UI Fabric. We should use the term Fluent UI. It's basically the same thing. It's a rebrand, but it will go with this name from now on. Okay, but why would we want to use React? There is a cool feature called Virtual DOM. That's my favorite, by far favorite feature of React. What is Virtual DOM? That's a feature that when you want to render your DOM elements, it will re-render only the parts that are changed. It will not re-render the whole DOM, so it's performant more in performance. It's more efficient than the classical DOM manipulations that you are making, and it's really easy to use it. In future, we will be the part of the virtual DOM of model-driven app, for example. We can use our controls like the developers in Microsoft use the first-party controls with their apps. But of course, there is a big cost for that. We need to be careful because we are affecting the DOM of whole application. So if we fail in that case, that's not available at the moment. But if we make an error there and it's not handled, we'll break the application. So now engineering team is working on it, how can efficiently move that feature to preview for us to test it. But it will be amazing and a huge productivity boost. That's why you need to learn React, because if you know React, you will be able to make the components like the Microsoft first-party team is working on. And the Fluent UI part is like basically a bootstrap. I think that most developers are familiar with Bootstrap, the UI framework provided that has a lot of controls out of the box. And the good thing here is that Fluent UI uses the same controls in the model-driven apps as now they're tending to make that transition also to the Canvas apps part, because now the project Odell components are also written in Fluent UI, but it will come to the original Canvas apps later in the year, I think. And you can use pre-built controls. You don't need to make, for example, a calendar control by yourself or edit the CSS just to make it to have a look and feel like the, for example, model-driven app. Just don't reinvent the wheel. Use the technologies that are offered by Microsoft to you. Okay. Now the framework APIs. I saw in the community that people are not exploring the APIs by the framework. There are a lot of API calls that can help you building your components, and you maybe don't know about it. So dive deep in the framework APIs and you will find something useful for sure. For example, read-only. It's not handled by the framework by itself. You need to handle how your control will react when it's read-only. For example, I need to make my fields read-only. I have a component that is bound to one field but has like 3 subfields to use for. I need to make all those fields read-only. It will not be made read-only by the framework. You need to make it read-only, but you can see if the field you're trying to use is in read-only state in your host application. And if it is, you can handle the read-only mode by yourself. Also comes for the field level security, but it can be tricky for complex controls. For example, if I want to lock everything in my control, I simply make an overlay and everything will be unresponding because the overlay is beneath that. Okay, so explore the framework APIs. If I need to make, for example, number control, and I don't know if I want to use decimal point or decimal comma in my numbers, I can easily check that in my user settings to see if the user is using comma or maybe it's using a dot as a notation for that. So definitely dive deep in the framework APIs and don't hack things, just use the supported things from the framework APIs. And now the interesting part here is model versus canvas. I'm mostly working on model-driven PCFs, but I worked on some canvas PCFs too. Basically, PCF has been around for years with a different name, but it's been developing for a few years now, and it's made for the model-driven apps. Canvas apps are still behind in features, and I think they will always be, because they're not GA. They're in a preview till March 2021, and that's a long period to wait for it. So maybe things will change till then. keep that in mind if you're working on Canvas app components. They have totally different runtimes. When I tell you totally, they're really totally. For example, Web API, that's the core part that I use in my controls when I need to pull data all around. And they're not available in Canvas. And even if I'm working with a Canvas app that is connected to CDS, I cannot use Web API straight away. I need to hack things. I need to make a custom client Web API for the Canvas part just to make it work on a Canvas app. And that's hilarious at the moment. I hope that Web API will be available in Canvas soon. But there is also flexibility in Canvas apps. For example, if you want to mix fields and datasets, if you try to create a PCF, you know, when you create it for a model-driven app, you can bind it to a dataset or a field or multiple fields. But you can't mix datasets and fields in model-driven app. In Canvas app, you can do it that way. For example, you have few inputs that are coming as a fields, I don't know, for example, text, a single line of text elements, but on the other side, you have also a data set that will be used in the controls. And that data set is a collection in Canvas app. You can mix those things up in Canvas app, and the flexibility level in Canvas apps in that way is much, much bigger. You can build much richer components in Canvas apps if you need to mix the field types. And what I tend to do when I create a model-driven or a Canvas PCF, I always split those two logics in two separate controls. So I have one version that will be run that I will put on a model-driven app, and the other version that I will put on a Canvas, just because I don't want to have clash between the logic. So I don't want to make some decisions and stuff around it based on which is the host. Is it Canvas or model driven? Make it easy, just split those controls to two different versions and go with that. Okay, so how is the time? 25 minutes in. Okay, so the 8.1 is debugging. There's a great feature there, testing harness, but is it great that much? I personally don't use test harness at all. I actually hate it because when I try to build some bigger controls, it will just will not do the job. I need to deploy my control and test it that way, because pushing organization to your environment will take time. If you are using some modern features of JavaScript, like async await patterns or stuff like that, it will be unreadable. You can do it straight in a harness. Web API, you need to mock data. You can't have the real data pulled from the environment. You will just have mocks that you need to put inside as the CSV files, and I don't like it. I want to debug it on the real data that I will have in my system. And how can we do that? There is always a better way of debugging it, and my favorite is Fiddler. So the complex controls are impossible to debug in harness. You need another way, and the Fiddler is the answer. And why is that so? Because you will debug your local files in your browser. You will just inject your local files into the browser, and you will have new version of your PCF straight away. There is no need for time-consuming imports over and over again. It's hard to start, but it's huge for a productivity boost once you set it up. You don't need mocks, you will use web APIs. And the other interesting part is you can use source map as a debugging tool. And what is that? That is the feature that allows you to debug through your TypeScript files and not your JavaScript, bundled JavaScript that can be, for example, minified when you deploy the control to the production, and it will just be a better way of debugging, because it's easier to debug TypeScript than minify the JavaScript. That's for sure. And now I think we'll go to the biggest demo of this presentation to show you how you can use the fiddler as a debugging tool for your PCFs. Okay, let's go to the Visual Studio and our control. Okay, so just let's close everything to clear the workspace. Okay, so we have a simple control here that has one input element and with a placeholder, and it will just pass the value back to the host and stuff like that, and it will color the text to red. Nothing fancy, nothing special, but I can show you how you can debug with Fiddler with the simple control. The first thing you want to do is to build your component. You just go PCF builder and go to build component. I don't know the command. I just initiate the PCF builder command from the drop down. Okay, now we have built our component, and as we can see, we have bundle.js here. Okay, where can we find that bundle.js? In out folder, and here bundle.js. Basically, that's the file that will be packed with your control and pushed to the environment via push commands or importing the solution. And all you need to do, if you are just changing the logic in your TypeScript, you need to inject that bundle.js file back to your browser to debug through it. And how can we done that? Okay, so open the Fiddler. You can easily download the Fiddler. That's the new version. Maybe you've seen the classic version. That's the new Fiddler everywhere, but it has all the features that you need for the debugging. On the right-hand side, you can see autoresponder part. Go to the autoresponder part, and you can just add a new rule. And what we want to achieve here, so if we open this rule, it has a simple regex that says everything that ends with bundle.js will be replaced with our bundle.js from our output folder. So you just copy path to this file and input it in the rule. Click save and you're good to go. So now when we load our application, if I go to one of my applications here that I have PCF deployed, okay, I go to the accounts and create a new account. Okay, and the account name has that PCF here. And if I start typing, let's say test, it will color the text in red. Nothing special, but now I want to change something in my PCF control. For example, I don't want to use the placeholder text as I used to from my variable. I just want to make it type, I don't know. First thing you need to do is run build and build your control. When you build your control, the new bundle.js is created, and it's automatically set to Fiddler because our Fiddler is pointing to that file, and we want to see if the new value is shown here. If I press refresh, I will see start typing. That's not a new value. And why is that so? Because you need to always do a hard reload to make the Fiddler work. So open the command line and right click on the refresh button, empty cache and hard refresh. When you press that, it will load your local file, bundle.js, and use it here. So easy as that. As you can see, now we have a new placeholder. All the logic that we change, we simply need to execute the build command, build our component, and we just, after I want, for example, I need type 1. I want to have that new value here. Initiate build, and when the build is finished, I don't need to make a hard reload anymore. I just need to hit refresh, and it will change the value for me to the new value. And you can imagine how big this is. It's a huge productivity boost because you don't need to push it every now and then. Okay, but we can make it more easier to debug, because if we go here, search for bundle.js, we can see that there is a file that is hard to debug. So we want to debug it through TypeScript. And how can we do that? Go back to our project and search for TypeScript config.json. All you need to do is input here source map equals true. It will basically instruct TypeScript to create source maps for our code. Okay, and one more thing that you need to do is go to the node modules, scroll all the way down to the PCF scripts, and then all the way down to webpack config. Let me close that. Scroll down to the OOB config and change the dev tool to source map. That way we will instruct our webpack that we will use source maps. So because we want to debug through our TypeScript files, which are not there for us in the initial configuration. And also interesting part here is that source maps are not pushed to your environment by default. That's why you need to inject the source map to work. Okay, when you do that, you can just go back to your project and go to out folder, and when you build a component, you will get a bundle.js.map. It's a huge file that will basically contain all the code in your TypeScript and where it's located in the JavaScript. So the mappings between those two files. Okay, and now we need to instruct the fiddler to inject that file too. Go to the fiddler, go to create a new rule that will just say bundle.js.map and the path to bundle.js.map file here. Okay, I just need to enable it. Okay, it's enabled now. And go back to my application, hard reload just to pick up the source maps. And when I open the inspector and the source editor here, I can directly search for my index.ts file. And look here, I have the exact same TypeScript file that I have in my code. I can, if I have multiple files, I can search for them too. For example, you can see here I have textboxhelper.ts. It is bundled in our bundle.js, but I can try to search it, textboxhelper.ts. I have that class too. So I can easily debug through all my classes that I have in my project, and it's much easier, especially if you are debugging on production where you have a minified code that is unreadable. You want to use source maps in that case. Okay, I covered the debugging part, and just go back to the presentation to cover a few more things before we end. The next thing is performance. I highly recommend that you use production build while building your solutions. So execute ms build in configuration equals to release to minify your code, to make it as small as possible, to make the rendering smoothly as possible. Please use production build for ms build. I saw that a lot of people are not using it. They just initiate ms build without any parameters, and it will create unmanaged solution with unminified files, and you don't want that kind of solutions in your production environment. But that's not the only case that you need to think about performance. For example, if you're making small, let's say microcontrols with a simple logic, they're used multiple times on your form. Should we use frameworks like React or Fluent UI in that case? The simple answer is no. You really need to think of it that way, because if I add my control 10 times on a form and I'm using React and Fluent UI or any other library out there, it will be loaded once for every control. So imagine if I have 10 controls that are loading 10 times full React framework on load. That's total performance disaster. The form will load for ages if you add more and more those controls. And what's the answer there? You want to make a huge control in that case. If you know that you will use that control only in that case, and you should consider making it as a 1. Okay, so add those 10 fields as input parameters, add those 10 fields on the UI part, make it like a single page application. Then use frameworks as long as you want to make them easier to work with your code, because in this way you will load one React, one Fluent UI, one any other library, not times your control is loaded. And that's a huge performance boost. I've seen few controls that are designed as micro and using heavy frameworks behind them, and that's a not good idea. Consider making huge controls that will make your apps more performant. Okay, and the last one is don't hack. I know that everybody loves to hack, but at least try not to. And supported things are bad and things will eventually break. Sooner or later, you will need to tidy that unsupported code because it will break and you will lose a lot of hours just to fix that because you were using unsupported things. Also, one thing that I notice is people are using XRM page like they're creating JavaScript web resources. That's not the way how you do it in the PCF. For example, if you need value of a field that is on a form, don't use XRM page. Parameterize it. Uh, Create a new property in your manifest and pass that input there. Don't use the XRM page to get those data, or use maybe a web API for fetching those data. If I need to fetch something, I will fetch it via web API. I will not hack the framework by using XRM page because we are in a context of a model-driven app where XRM page is actually there. Explore the framework docs. If you don't know the framework, you will probably try to hack things around, and that's not a good way to do it. The documentation about the framework is pretty good, decent. Everything is well explained. I highly recommend to go through all the features that are there, and you will make yourself life easier because you will find something useful there for sure. Eventually, all those things that you hack will be available probably in future. There's an idea section in the community forums where you can post your idea or your request for a feature, and the product team will prioritize their tasks based on the idea section in the community. So feel free to make the request there, ask for thumbs up in the community, and hopefully somebody from the product team will see it and make it bigger priority in their tasks. It will always pay off in future because hacking is good. It's always the way to learn the new things, but not in this case. Or at least not for production use. Maybe you hack things just to see if something is working or not, but please don't use it on a production level applications. If you follow the given interface by Microsoft guys from the product team, you'll be good to go. There will be no cliffs in that regards, and you will be thanked to you later. And I think I came to end of my presentation. Feel free to ask me questions. Thank you for joining this wonderful conference. And once again, there are links that you can contact me below. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ivan. Any questions, team? Anyone?
Thank you, Ivan, for your wonderful session. It was great learning some nitty-gritties with PCF, and yeah, it's really a great thing that you shared your knowledge here at Global Business Application Day from D365 Champs. I
Yeah,
know
thanks for having me.
to come and prepare especially for PCF. Ankush and Nishita, if there are any questions, you can take them first. I have one question because he has been doing a lot of PCF. I would want to learn from his learnings for sure. So, I was techie to start my journey. Is there any question, first of all?
No, not till now, Dipesh. You can
So,
continue.
so this is to do with even many of us come from the background. Like I was a techie 10 years back, 11 years back maybe, and we used to build a lot of crazy web resources, including Silverlight. Do you remember them or heard about them by chance? And then I learned HTML, jQuery really hard way. Now, what's the best possible suggestion you want to give to somebody who is acquainted with HTML web resources and then going to move to PCF? Because see, React and TypeScript are very different, right? Way different way of thinking altogether.
Yeah, but as I see that way, most of the guys that are developing things for Dynamics before are used to C# .NET, which is really smooth transition to TypeScript because everything in TypeScript looks like C# code and it's easy to learn. It's easier to learn TypeScript, in my opinion, than, for example, in JavaScript if you're starting. That's for sure. And there are a lot of analogies. For example, you have npm in for TypeScript. That's basically Nugget where you use it in your .NET code, and everything around is like more object-oriented, people-friendly. So most people that are used to .NET development can easily transition to TypeScript development, in my opinion.
Yeah, Ivan, Teams was very kind to me in between. But yeah, I'll go back to recording to check that. But yeah, that's the kind of main question my consultants ask me, and many people ask me, especially moving from the HTML background to PCF. Definitely, React and TypeScript are the way to go. I agree with
Hello.
you.
Yeah, you actually need to spend some time on React. That's not the case. Like I will hop on it and I will know the React. No, React is more like a difficult part in the PCF development. I think if you are starting with the React now.
Yeah, I will agree. It was quite different, and every time you learn a new kind of way of doing it all over again, it's always a new learning, right? You have to unlearn
Yeah.
something and learn again something new. Thank you, Ivan. And if there are any other set of queries, Nishita and Ankush, feel free to ask
Yes,
to Ivan.
Yes, we do
there
have.
are questions actually. So the first one says that you said that we do not use xrm.page but parameterize it. Can you elaborate on that?
So when you try to fetch something from the form, you will, if you are using JS web resources, you will use XRM page to get it, but not in the PCF. Some people are using that XRM page directly in the TypeScript code to get those kind of values, but I would highly suggest don't do it that way. Just make a new property, just make a new input in your PCF control and pass that field to your input property, and you will have the value there and you'll be good to go. You'll follow the interface. You will not break stuff with XRM page because of course it's deprecated even in JS web resources.
I hope that answered your question, Yogesh. We have one more question, which is if can I use Svelte framework inside the PCF control?
Sorry, can we? I'm not familiar with Svetla framework, but as long as you can pull the framework via npm, you can use it. People are using all lots of frameworks inside PCF to do the job. So if it's on npm, you can pull it out and just use it.
Okay, thanks.
Hope that was helpful, Harshad.
Yeah, I just got disconnected and I just joined again. I heard that we can use npm stuff inside that PCF, but when I go through the that ts config for the PCF control, I have found only that allows for only React and Angular, I guess.
I'm not sure because I've seen people using Knockout also.
No, actually, yeah, knockout. I don't think so. Whether I have checked the TS config for the PCF project, the PCF framework itself providing us, we can't modify the TS config. I guess I had tried once and I got failed inside in that functionality.
Yeah, maybe you need to configure Webpack inside the PCF scripts in that case, because maybe if it's packed a different way, then you need to add it the Webpack configuration, where what is used in PCF scripts. If that sounds okay.
Okay, I'll try that. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
We have another question. Can you use Ionic with PCF?
I personally didn't try it, and I think I didn't see any controls using Ionic. So I'm not sure. I cannot tell you if it's possible or not.
Okay, so anyone else has any questions? Please do let us know in the chat window.
I believe we don't have any more questions. So thank you so much everyone for joining the session. We really appreciate your presence. We hope that you are taking away some new learnings from this session. Thanks, Ivan, for an amazing session and taking out time to share your knowledge with us.
Thanks
you
for
so
having
much.
me, guys.
Thank you so much, Ivan. So, Vivek, I believe we can stop the recording.
Yep, I'll do that. Thank you, Ivan, for a wonderful session and sharing your time, knowledge, and energy with us today.